In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern, taking a look at multiple snowstorms here in the eastern United States, one of which is happening tomorrow. So we're going to be starting to see this happening here quickly. It is a little warm along the eastern states and also quite rainy, but there is going to be snow coming down. I think that we can get accumulation in a few different spots, but it's going to be a little bit tougher than usual. On top of this, we do have numerous potential snowstorms popping up on both of our models here that we're going to be looking at today, again in the eastern states. It is warm right now. We do expect colder times ahead as soon as Thursday, really. Thursday, Friday is going to be quite cool. We will warm up subsequently after that. And then there is some disagreement on the models, but we do have both of them showing colder air returning at times, one of which is going to be a little bit more intense than the other. We'll look at that in just a little bit. So let's dive into things. I know that was a mouthful. Let's just take a look at what's going to be happening. We're going to start out tomorrow, actually, because I'm making this video a little bit late. But as soon as 7 a.m. tomorrow Eastern time, we see a low is beginning to form there somewhere near northern Virginia. And we start to see snowfall mixing in for Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and southern Ohio. Again, these areas have been quite warm and seeing rainfall, so it might be a little tough to see accumulation. I would say, obviously, and this goes for most systems, obviously, but in the higher elevation areas, you're probably going to have a better chance of seeing accumulation, just bottom line. As we take a look at the overall pattern real quickly, we do see a positive PNA kind of returning here for the moment out west, and this is what is causing this surge of deep diving Arctic air towards the eastern states here. We're seeing this really dive in quickly, low forming along that line, and that is how we're getting snowfall on the back end. We're going to see patterns like this set up throughout this model run, actually. By the afternoon, we start to see heavier snowfall. We have a tandem team here, basically, of low pressure systems, and really how you can look at it is there's some pretty broad low pressure all the way along this line between these two areas, but these are the two centers. The lowest pressure going to be on this northern one, but there is still relatively low pressure here near eastern Carolina. This is bringing heavy snowfall for a corridor, basically starting out on the south end for western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and that goes straight up through areas of Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and then in through into eastern Canada as well. And you can tell that for a lot of these areas, especially kind of like this corridor here, we are seeing quite heavy snowfall. So for some of these hilly and mountainous areas there in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, kind of like the Finger Lakes area of New York, we could start to see accumulation, especially if it's coming down very heavily, as this model suggests. As we move towards the overnight, 4 a.m. here on Thursday, December 12th, we start to see this snowfall, for the most part, move out and up into Canada as a 972 millibar low pressure center really starts to get going up there. We're seeing heavy snowfall for eastern Canada because of that. And not only that, as this really brutal Arctic air, as I mentioned, moves in for Thursday here, it's sort of moving in horizontally from directly west into the east. And we start to get these lakes going with some lake effect snowfall, especially for Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York there, and then portions of Canada are going to be the areas to watch for. But there is still enough warmth left over in those waters to bring snowfall in the form of lake effect snow, and we're going to be watching very closely for this. As we see a low pressure center move towards the northwest coast, Washington, not really Washington on this frame, but Oregon, California, northern Nevada, do start to see some precipitation moving in and some snowfall as well for those hilly and mountainous areas. As we keep going towards the afternoon here of Thursday on the 12th, we see that the Sierra Nevada and Cascades kind of steal the show here with plenty of snowfall. We still see lake effect snow happening across these lakes regions. And we still see the dippage here of the jet stream where there's colder air located over all of these eastern states for the day on Thursday, as we mentioned earlier. For Friday, we're a little less cool along the east, and we are starting to see this southern push of warmer air, especially for some of the Midwest and Plains states, but it is starting to influence the southeast in particular. But we're still left with neutral temperatures in the west, so it's unclear what's going to happen at this point. We do see actually more of a trough in the east than the west at this point. Most of your jet stream is doing this. So yes, mostly cold in the east here for the moment, but we are going to see this change. As we move towards Saturday, we see this really, I would say, near normal pattern set up here in the east. We are very, very close to your climate averages in these areas. We do see a bit of a very weak low near Illinois, some snowfall to the north of that for Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a bit of a cold front stretching along out ahead of this low here. And that is bringing potential heavy showers and thunderstorms for these areas. Really, really interesting pattern we have. And then we have a couple of areas of low pressure out west here, bringing snowfall from the Sierra Nevada up through the Cascades and even into the northern Rockies, as well as some coastal rainfall out west. Your biggest ridge to speak of is going to be here just to the east of the Rockies and kind of over the central Rockies here, where we have double dipping troughs, one here to the east of that for the Midwest, and then one to the west of that for the Pacific Northwest. As we keep going towards Sunday, we kind of remain in this near average pattern in the east, kind of rainy now by this point, not many storms to discuss. Monday here, it's like another trough wants to move through, and we have a low between the Hudson Bay and the Great Lakes here, a little bit of a cold front maybe, and this is dragging cold air in. But what happens at the same exact time is cold air starts to move onshore to the northwest here. And this is basically going to keep this trough likely kind of flat. We'll see what ends up happening, but we also see continued snowfall and rainfall for the west here. I want to take us straight into Tuesday. And sure enough, that ends up being a little bit of a flatter trough in the east. We do end up with slightly cooler conditions here along these eastern areas, but it really, really is a letdown considering that we have this big trough here, this deep diving trough here across the west. We end up with a little bit of a softer trough here in the east as a result of that, with the main ridge being over the central states here. We continue to see snowfall throughout the Rockies and Cascades, and even for the interior eastern states, we're seeing some snowfall there as there is a coastal low nearby. Things aren't really getting interesting yet. Let's take a look at Wednesday on the 8th, and this is when things really get interesting. 995 here over Kansas. We'll get back to that in a minute, but we see a redeveloping positive PNA along the western states here. This almost immediately causes a trough here for the plains, and this is on the move eastward. It has a cold front and a warm front dynamic here, but likely the way this low is going to move is towards the northeast, so that cold front is going to be kind of growing in height over time as that moves eastward, and that will encompass basically the entire eastern states here. Now, we do see snowfall on the west end of this low for Colorado, Nebraska, western Kansas there. Some heavier rainfall and even probably thunderstorms and severe weather in this corridor here. Let's see what happens by the time we reach Thursday. And sure enough, again, it moves towards the northeast nearby the Great Lakes. So even though it's not coming from the north, it is kind of flirting with this Great Lakes, Hudson Bay area. Strong cold front here. And we continue to see warm air surging for a lot of the west here. High pressure in there as well. And this cold air is basically tracking in and along where that cold front is going. So we see it moving in towards the east. Meanwhile, what you can expect for the East Coast is a little bit of a surge of warmth before this cold front arrives. We usually see this happen underneath these warm fronts that are out ahead of cold fronts here, just like this. So this is your setup for Thursday on the 19th. And then for Friday on the 20th, we see this really large warm bubble out here for the west. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see these models flirt with colder air in the east than what this is showing. With this strong of a positive PNA out west, I would expect to see deep diving cold air for basically most of the eastern states. Nevertheless, we do have precipitation kind of tracking up the coast along a cold front and some snowfall again for the western end. It's really hardly mixing in. Overnight, we get a little bit more of that, as you can see. This is Saturday at 1 a.m. That's the 21st, by the way. 7 a.m. here. Some, again, PA, New York, New England snowfall. Here's 1 p.m., and then it's basically finished off. We do get a bit of a weird coastal low here developing with a cutoff kind of area of cold air here from the main trough, and we get eastern North Carolina, eastern Virginia snowfall. This is a very unusual looking storm, and, you know, really just low odds of this happening. I can't stress that enough. This is a very weird pattern we're seeing the GFS put in place. But interesting to see. It does end up bringing snowfall to the northeast, although we get mostly an ice storm up here for New England on this particular model. We do get the snowfall, and we do get deeper cold as time goes on. Look at this. This is Wednesday the 25th, Christmas. Very, very cold in the east, warm in the west, as we kind of just see this positive PNA last for many days, maybe even weeks here. So we start to see the cold air really taking a free fall in the east once again. Some snowfall happening around the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic. So again, chances of white Christmas is up this year from previous years, to say the least. We start to get some coastal action, cold air in place. Really, really interesting. And I want to track this positive PNA because we get it move in just 8 days from now on December 18th, and it lasts all the way through the 26th. So if we see this positive PNA move back in, we could see it last for a long time, like we just saw in early December, late November timeframe. If we see that type of a pattern again, watch out, because we could be on high alert for snowstorms, very cold air. And really, when we look at these long-range models, the specifics of the storms and the, snowfall and all that, it's really hard to predict exactly, right? But something like a positive PNA is very easy to track in the long range, and these models typically have a good handle of if that type of thing is going to develop and stick around, or if it's going to break up. Those are the types of signals we can see 10 to 15 days out. So when we're looking at these long range models, that's what we should be paying attention to. As far as storms, if we're seeing frequent coastal storms pop up on the model, you don't say, hey, it's going to snow on, Friday, the 27th in Virginia. You say, hey, this model is showing consistent coastal storms with the upcoming pattern, and that might lead to something if one of those actually verifies. So that's how we look at the long range and get accurate information from it. We're not looking at the specifics, we're looking at overall pattern stuff. And that's what has basically led to a lot of success, especially recently, that we've had here on the channel, starting in a lot of the hurricane season. We had some successes, and into the fall, like November, we saw that really brutal cold pattern weeks ahead of time. And that is how we find that type of stuff. And I hope to continue to stack these kind of successes of breaking down these models moving forward. And I hope you guys learned stuff along the way as well. Let's look at the European model. There is some differences, and not much, here soon, but we see some broad low pressure in here, some interior snowfall for Pennsylvania, New York, West Virginia here, and that lake effect snow starts to get going once that cold air is here. That storm moves out, we get lake effect snow just like the GFS model. I want to move it until we see a difference here. I guess first off, with this central United States storm here that develops, we still get the Rocky Mountain snowfall behind it. But as it moves up, what we're actually going to see is a major snow system develop here for the northern plains and upper Midwest for Monday the 16th here. This is 1 p.m. So Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota. And then by about 7 p.m., we start to talk about northern Minnesota as well with this. So Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota area in general, this European model is putting us on high alert for a major snowstorm. And we get that same cool down, and it's similarly pretty flat to the, what the GFS model showed, but this is the difference. I want to see what happened on the GFS model around the 20th, because this is a huge difference. We get this really brief cold air, but look at what happens. We don't really get a huge cool down for anything after the 20th. We get a brief one, and then, it takes until about the 24th, 25th here. Let's see what happens on the European model, though. This is the 21st. Look at this. Okay, let's track this one by one, because this storm I kind of didn't pay attention to. Thursday on the 19th, we get a low forming here. Pretty classic territory, actually, for Mid-Atlantic and Northeast snowstorms to start out in the southern plains. And we're going to watch this one kind of just meander along the southern states, and then boom, move right up the coast. And that's when we cash in on something pretty substantial here on this particular model. So just before the Christmas time, let's watch this play out. Again, we get this brief cooldown for the 18th, 19th here, and then we get a more major one move in. And this one moves right off the Mid-Atlantic coast. This is right around 1 p.m. on Saturday, December 21st. So we get large amounts of snowfall for the Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, Northeast here. Also, look, we have another low up here, so some additional low pressure. We are getting a lot of snowfall just in this area in general. And look at how the positive PNA just hangs on. We see this very strong positive PNA, brutal Arctic air move in, and then a low move right underneath. This is exactly the setup we've been waiting for, because we've had this, we've had this deep diving cold air, but what we've been missing is this storm moving underneath. And finally, we get something popping up on the models that shows that. And look at this, 984 right around Long Island, and we get massive amounts of snowfall for eastern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, into New York, and I'm guessing into New England here in a second. So let's see what plays out here as we move into the 23rd. Yeah, so we see a 978, 973 there, right outside of Boston, and we're seeing basically all of your New England states seeing substantial snowfall here. And not only that, this whole pocket in here has brutally cold air all around. And we continue with the positive PNA. So both of these models showing this positive PNA prevail for long periods of time over the mid to long term here. Very interesting. And we keep that Arctic air around. So it starts on like the, let's see, it starts on about the 19th here. 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, we get another round of it move in. And then we don't really get to Christmas. But you can imagine, I mean, we have some warmer air set up right here. It's a little bit of a breakup in the positive PNA finally happening here on Christmas Day on this model. But we do see some dippage throughout the central states. And I'm sure we're going to see a little bit of a cooler day here on Christmas on this model. But keep in mind, this model returns us right back into the very, very stormy west, where we see brutal amounts of snowfall for Cascades, Sierra Nevada, Northern Rockies here. That could get interesting as well if it happens on Christmas Day. Let's take a look here at the total precipitation, and we do get off and on high amounts in the Northwest, obviously, but we do cash in on finally some very far above average precipitation in the East on this model run. So let's take a look at that. And mostly below average for the West. Near average to above average throughout a lot of the plains, Midwest, Great Lakes, and then the East here, where we get blues in these areas that really need precipitation, that is 2 to 5 inches above average over the next 15 days. That would be extremely helpful to undo this drought that we've been stuck in for like what feels like 6 months now. Total snowfall in the GFS model, we do get this weird snowstorm for North Carolina and Virginia. I would, for the most part, disregard that. We do get some Midwest and Plains action here. Some Great Lakes stuff going on, multiple feet in there. And then the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, we get probably 2 snowstorms, right, on this model run. Yeah, here's the snow that happens tomorrow. So a couple of inches, a dusting up to a couple of inches here throughout this corridor. And then we end up with more moving in towards the end of the model run here. Where we get maybe, a few inches up to 6 to 10, maybe even 10 to 15 here throughout New England. But again, specifics aren't too important. The European model, though, we see a lot more for the West. That includes the Rockies, Cascades, and Sierra Nevada. We get a lot more for the Northern Plains, Upper Midwest, Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast. And not only that, for the Central Plains into some of the Mid-Atlantic, we end up with more than the GFS model. So altogether, a much snowier model here than the GFS model. And when we look at the Northeast, I want to just zoom in on this for a minute, because check out these numbers. These mountain ranges, over the course of that very major looking snowstorm, we see 1, 2, maybe even close to 3 feet of snowfall for areas of upstate New York, Green Mountains and Berkshires, and then even the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Obviously, very realistic areas to see gargantuan amounts of snowfall. But in the long range, we really want to take things like this with a grain of salt. I think the bigger picture here is that these models are indicating there is a pattern that supports this type of outcome, and that is huge news to say the least. As we just dive into the temperature pattern, the GFS model is going to be a little bit more mild. We see some colder air move in here again for Thursday, lasts through a bit of Friday. And then Saturday into Sunday, we warm back up through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday here. And we get another cool down around another Thursday through the weekend here for the East. We kind of just stick with the colder temperatures in the East as this positive PNA really comes together. Again, let's check out when it starts. I mean, we really see it starting to grow around the 19th. So 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th. So we're looking at and this is the 26th, so we're looking at like 7 days of a positive PNA at least on the end of this GFS model's run here. And again, likely this would result in colder air than what this is showing. In my opinion, just that consistent of a positive PNA and that intensive one would likely bring very, very cold temps. As we take a look at the European model here, we're going to see more intense cold, like I mentioned. So we see this cold move in, again, last through Friday, and even a bit of Saturday on this model before really breaking up for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then by Wednesday, we have another very cold air mass here. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and here comes that second one again that really doesn't even really end. Saturday, Sunday, the 22nd, Monday, the 23rd, Tuesday, the 24th, and that's the end of the model run. But again, we warm up briefly, but look at this. This looks like more cold air that's about to move in for Christmas Day, which would bring very cold temperatures again. And similarly to the GFS model, we just stick with a positive PNA. I want to see the actual dates on this one as well. Looks like the 19th, maybe the 20th. And then we really just warm from that point and continue warming, and it actually worsens over time. So very interesting. There is obviously areas where we have disagreement, but things like the positive PNA is where we actually have really big agreement, and that's where it really matters. So really good news here on the models for cold and snow lovers. I think colder and snowier times are ahead of us here through the final 2/3 of the month of December, and January is a total question mark. I can't wait to see what our early estimates for that are. We'll be talking about that over the coming weeks. So be sure to subscribe. We upload pretty much every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.